Welcome to Phoenix, Arizona for the start of this year's 16-race Formula One World Championship. And I confidently predict that it's going to be a season with more drama, impact and excitement than any we've had for years. Because there are new cars, new drivers, new engines, new rules, and a host of driver moves from one team to another, including the return of Nigel Mansell from Ferrari to Williams, for whom he won 13 of his 16 Grand Prix victories.
This is a very important and very significant year for me, but the most thing is, and I'd like to say this to all the people out there, is that we've come back to enjoy. You see, Patrick Head, Frank Williams and myself all agreed unanimously that almost at the top of the list, no matter what happens, if the engine goes or the gearbox goes or something happens with the car or I make a mistake, we come back fighting the next day and we all enjoy. And enjoy motor racing, because there's an awful lot of teams in the pit lane haven't been enjoying motor racing for a long time.
There are new rules governing driver conduct this year, thought by some to have been inspired by forceful driving by Ayrton Senna, but he disagreed.
If you are ahead most of the time, if you are on pole positions more than anybody by far, if you lead races and laps from races more than anybody by far, you are always focused. You are always the focus of attention of the TV cameras and by consequence the world.
1991 sees one of the most exciting reshuffles yet of the driver pack, though not for McLaren, who continue with world champion Ayrton Senna and Gerhard Berger. Arch rivals Ferrari have signed the dauntingly brave young Jean Alesi to complement the experience of Alain Prost, and the resultant battle for supremacy will be fascinating. He takes the place of a re-inspired Nigel Mansell, relishing the prospect of unquestioned #1 status back at Williams, where Riccardo Patrese remains as a dependable teammate. Nelson Piquet, who won the last 2 races of 1990, stays with Benetton, as does fellow Brazilian Roberto Moreno, while Sandro Nannini recovers from his tragic helicopter accident. Rounding off the likely front runners are Tyrrell, who might have lost Alesi but have gained Honda V10 power, and young Italian Stefano Modena, one of the stars of winter testing. Satoru Nakajima stays on as #2. Great news is that Martin Donnelly is making an excellent recovery from his dreadful Jerez accident, and until he's fit, Julian Bailey will deputise at Lotus alongside Formula 3 champion Mika Häkkinen.
Despite reservations about the new McLaren, Ayrton Senna was straight into spectacular action at Phoenix to take his 53rd pole position, a full second faster than his arch-rival Alain Prost in the new Ferrari. So Senna and Prost on the front row of the grid again. Nigel Mansell's replacement of Ferrari, Jean Alesi, was fastest of all on Friday, but on Saturday he clipped the tyre wall and dropped to 6th. Riccardo Patrese in the new Williams Renault, about to start his 209th Grand Prix, was in terrific form, 3rd on the grid, whilst Emanuele Pirro pre-qualified his Dallara Judd fastest and then qualified an inspired 9th. Bertrand Gachot starts 14th in the new Jordan Ford, but teammate Andrea Cesaris failed to make the race. So, once again, Senna and Prost start from row 1, with Nigel Mansell 4th, Piquet 5th and Alesi 6th, ahead of Berger and Moreno. Martin Brundle starts 12th and Häkkinen a fine 13th. Britain's Mark Blundell starts his first Grand Prix 24th on the grid, but Julian Bailey failed to qualify. 82 laps or 2 hours, whichever's the sooner. It's going to be a long, hard Phoenix Grand Prix, and Senna gets away beautifully on the left. Alain Prost on the right. Watch at the back of the grid. Mansell's coming through well on the left and down Jefferson Avenue into turn 1, the right-hander. It's Senna leading, Prost in 2nd place, then it's Mansell, Patrese, Alesi, Gerhard Berger in 6th place. Thankfully, they've all got away together well. It's a very demanding course, this. It's what I call point and squirt. Short straights, stand on the brakes, 90 degrees left or 90 degrees right. It's a slightly different lap from last year, but Ayrton Senna is already making the pace, building a gap between himself and Alain Prost in 2nd place. Mansell still 3rd in the Williams, Riccardo Patrese in 4th place. Now this is the new corner that wasn't there last year. It's made the course considerably faster than last year, over 100 miles an hour for the pole position speed by Ayrton Senna. Prost still 2nd, Mansell, Patrese with Alesi right behind him. Then it's Gerhard Berger and the 2 Benettons, followed by Stefano Modena in the Tyrrell.
Yes, a good clean start. Here's the Lazy having a look down the inside of Mansell, and he makes it through. And Prost made a fairly sensible first lap. Senna pressing straight away from the start. Prost, you see, letting him go, but he'll have to pay attention. With Mansell already putting him under pressure. At the start, Lazy had to flex a bit of muscle at Gerhard Berger, and tremendous shot there from the camera right on the wall on the exit of the corner, and look at that.
Now, it's a terribly difficult course, this lap, to identify where you are, but we're coming up towards the end of the first lap now. There it is, and you see that Senna is already nearly 2 seconds ahead of the Ferrari, the V12, and don't forget, with Mansell in third place, this is the very first race that this new McLaren Honda V12 has competed in, and until they got to Phoenix, 2 of the 3 team cars had literally not even turned a wheel. There's Patrese, Gerhard Berger behind him.
And Patrese started the season in good form. He qualified extremely well relative to Mansell. And remember, of course, Williams also starting with almost brand new cars, done very limited test mileage with the new car for the season, and certainly not a great deal of experience of yet of working with the car and setting it up.
Now there's Alesi, fourth. This is his first race for Ferrari. Lap 2, race order. Ayrton Senna now 2.5 seconds ahead of Alain Prost, with Nigel Mansell in third place. Then it is Gerhard Berger, followed by Riccardo Patrese, and in sixth position, it's there. That's Martini in the Ferrari-powered Minardi, as you see Senna. Now he's got a clear track in front of him, and Prost is being harried now by Mansell, more and more.
Yes, and this is the time now when Prost, if he's going to stay with Senna, he's got to settle down and hold that gap. Senna still edging away.
Mansell in the semi-automatic gearbox, Williams with the new RS3 Renault V10 engine in it, and of course Nigel Mansell back to the team which gave him 13 of his 16 victories. Williams, now we're riding here with the Ferrari of Jean Alesi, who is in fourth position, and you see ahead the Williams of Nigel Mansell going into the left-hander, and Mansell himself is right behind Prost, so it is still Senna leading, Prost second, Mansell third, Alesi in fourth position, 2 Ferraris in the first 4, the McLaren leading and the Williams there of Nigel Mansell. And Riccardo Patrese is starting to close on Alesi. There he is in the background, number 6, followed by Berger, followed by Piquet, followed by Moreno, and then behind Roberto Moreno, the Brazilian in the Benetton, it is Stefano Modena in the V10 Honda-powered Tyrrell. And you can see that this course is literally concrete walls all the way round. It's like driving down a convoluted concrete tube.
Yes, and of course it's the old non-forgiving aspect of these street circuits where any mistake is punished by a bash into the wall. And in fact, that shot, if the driver gets it just a tiny bit wide, you can just lean on the wall a little bit with the tyres, but you don't want to hit it hard enough to get through the bulge in the tyre onto the wheel rim, because that will break the wheel and you'll get an instant flat. But
now you saw those floods of sparks punching up from underneath the cars. For those of you who wonder what they are, the answer is that the cars have got a very low ride height. The bottoms of the car are almost touching the ground, and there are titanium skid plates along the bottom of the car, and that is what is striking up the sparks. As you look at Jean Alesi in the Tyrrell last year, he finished second here after a stupefying drive in which for a long time he led Ayrton Senna in the McLaren, who finally went on to win. And so it's Alesi well up now. There is Piquet, Moreno, Modena, and you look at Alesi.
yes, and that trio of the 2 Benettons and Modena and the Tyrrell are the leading Pirelli runners, and Pirelli have done a great deal of work over the winter to get their tyres fully competitive with Goodyear. They've got a great range of tyres, and they're still fishing in the dark a little bit, but that is a pretty reasonable showing for their first race.
You watch Ayrton Senna. Now, last year here at Phoenix, Ayrton Senna was very low mentally. He had had a dreadful winter. He had to psych himself up to drive. But the stimulation of trying to catch and then get past Alesi did just that. This year, no such problem. And it's still Prost second, Mansell third, Alesi fourth. Being caught all the time by Riccardo Patrese with those sparks flying up in his face, and those sparks can actually burn your visor if they hit you. And then behind Patrese you see Gerhard Berger, who is in, and then it's behind them is Piquet, and Roberto Moreno is keeping up well, so is Stefano Modena. And of course, this being a street circuit, it is very, very difficult indeed to pass. Not as difficult as it is at Monaco, but difficult nonetheless.
Yes, and of course, being a street circuit is also relatively bumpy compared with the man-made circuits. Although what would appear like a billiard table to be driving an ordinary street car at, say, 40 miles an hour, you wouldn't really feel these bumps. At 160, 170, with very, very stiff suspension to keep the chassis as close as possible to the track, because that is important for the aerodynamics of the car. It helps to keep the car sucked down onto the road, and you get a very uncomfortable ride indeed. And the physical aspect of driving at these street circuits is hard. It's not uncomfortably hot here in Arizona at this time of the year. It would be a lot worse come the summer, but in these cars you get a great deal of heat from the engine, from the radiators on either side of you, and the cockpit temperatures are still probably some 130 degrees Fahrenheit.
Lap 4, Senna leading now by over 3 seconds. But as I said earlier on, it's a long, long race. If more than half the 26 starters finish, I will be very surprised indeed. There's going to be a lot of cars dropping out. You can see the positions there. Senna now 4 seconds on the 6th lap ahead of Alain Prost and building up the cushion that he ideally wants. What Senna would like to do is to build a cushion of about 20 seconds. Whether he can do it remains to be seen, because Prost, his chief rival, who used to be in the McLaren team with him, and in comes one of the Larousse Lolas. It is Eric Bernard, the Frenchman. Now, that car had a Lamborghini V12 engine in it last year. This year it has got a Hart V8 Ford, and it looks from the leisurely action around the car to me as though Eric Bernard's race has been run. And the Larousse team has had a dreadful winter. They lost their sponsor, they lost their engine, and now certainly one of their cars is out. Now, whether that's water or oil, I can't see. Looks to me rather more like oil than water. But anyway, that's the first retirement of the 1991 Phoenix Grand Prix. Eric Bernard in the Larousse Lola, and here is Senna, followed by Prost, followed by Mansell in third position, then the gap of 8 behind. Alesi and Patrese still gaining.
Yes, and Senna looks to be taking control of this race, because he's drawing steadily, slowly but steadily away from Alain Prost, and the runners behind him. Alesi's bouncing around, Mansell's competing hard, but and so is Patrese, incidentally, but nobody really looks as if they're capable of catching Senna at the moment. Going back to what you were saying, Murray, about the Larousse team, here come the Pirelli train, the top three. Of course, Tyrrell and Benetton are the best teams in recent times that Pirelli have had to represent them on their rubber, and it's a very big year for them. They're doing a lot of developments and trying to get on level terms. The Larousse team, incidentally, had one other disaster, which was a strange ruling from the FISA yet again, a retrospective one to do with the entry for their car at the beginning of last year, and they got ruled in this winter, a whole season, after they'd done a whole season's racing, that they'd called it by the wrong name. Well, maybe they had, but it seemed wrong to take their points away and to do a lot of damage to the team's commercial interests at that stage, and so retrospectively, when all that was needed was a word in their ear at the time.
Now you see the two Benettons, and the second one is driven by Roberto Moreno, the Brazilian who's had so long a time out of a decent car. He got a proper drive in Japan last year after Alessandro Nannini lost his arm in that helicopter crash, and thankfully it has amazingly been put back on, and Moreno's going well. But now look at Patrese again, chasing Jean Alesi. All the time he's got those blinding sparks coming at her. We're on lap 7 now, and it's still Senna leading It's still Prost in second place, Mansell in third position, and now Prost is over 4 seconds behind the leader. In fourth position, it's Alesi. Fifth is Riccardo Patrese, and that's what we're looking at now. And somebody off there on the, it's Häkkinen. Mika Häkkinen, the young Finnish driver, last year's Formula 3 champion of Britain, driving for the revived Lotus team with the Judd engine, and it looks to, well, Häkkinen is just sitting there. Whether he's spun and stalled the engine, he doesn't seem to have hit the wall.
Well, it certainly looks as if he's spun, judging he couldn't have really parked it at that angle unless he'd reversed up. And the other odd thing, though, is he's rather a long way from the corner, and there don't seem to be many marks, just a short set of skid marks leading to where he is. Now here we have an action replay, but that doesn't show us anything except those short skid marks and the car stopping there. Whether he hit a bump and lost control of the car, or whether something broke and he spun round on the straight, but he seemed too far from the corner to have lost it on the exit of the corner.
Now, Senna is starting to close up and lap people. This can always change, very often change the race, but Senna is an absolute master at getting through. Mansell in third position. You can see the gap between Mansell third and Alesi fourth, with Riccardo Patrese all the time looking for a way to get through. We're riding with Ayrton Senna now in the McLaren. He's passing, so that, I think that was Mika Häkkinen who's got going again. And Ayrton Senna driving smoothly, keeping away from the edge of the walls. He's got a clear track in front of him, except for the people he's lapping. He's got enough of a cushion between him and Alain Prost behind him in second place to be able to pick his point where he gets past people. And Senna, you will remember, has been a bit precipitous several times in the past. I remember him hitting Nakajima in Brazil. I remember him hitting Nannini in Hungary, but he's going to be very careful not to do that in this race. Now you can see what this Phoenix circuit is like from the driver's point of view. And at Phoenix, Senna's pole speed was over 100 miles an hour average. Quite incredible.
Yes, Senna undoubtedly matured during last season. He really, in the second half of last year, started to use his head during races on a tactical point of view. But yet again, in Australia, the last race of the season, he showed us that he is still flawed. He's still capable of making mistakes, because although he had a problem with the gearbox in Australia, he had a 25-second lead. He was having trouble getting the car into second gear. He'd had trouble 2/3 of a lap earlier, and it is perfectly possible to drive these cars just with the smallest reduction in speed, maybe a maximum of half a second a lap. Gives you an enormous safety margin for coping if you arrive in neutral. And Senna really had plenty of time in hand in Australia to have created that margin for himself and still have won the race. And that is the only real hope that the other drivers on this form can look to. Certainly today, because Senna is looking eminently dominant. And there's no reason to suppose the McLaren, despite its newness, is going to break. And maybe something will happen that can make Senna make error, but he's maturing all the time.
Out of turn 8, coming up to catch Suzuki, the Aguri Suzuki, the second Japanese driver in the LaRousse Lola. And now Senna is going down Washington Avenue at about 170 miles an hour. You can see he's catching on the V8-powered LaRousse Lola in front of him all the time. And it's still Senna leading, Prost second, Mansell third, Berger in fourth position, Patrese is fifth, and in sixth position it is Gerhard Berger in the McLaren, followed by the two Benettons, Nelson Piquet and Roberto Moreno. And into the pits comes Martin Brundle, making a Grand Prix return in the Yamaha V12 powered Brabham. It's not right yet. There's a new car coming for Imola, and at the moment I think it is too heavy, and probably there's too much drag and still not yet enough power from the Yamaha. But it's good to see Brabham with the right sort of engine now, and it's a long stop for Brundle, and Patrese is now really pushing Alesi.
Yes, and Patrese looks like a man who means business today. He's certainly charging. Now, this will be a tough one. Alesi's certainly not going to make himself easy to pass. Patrese is pretty determined.
This then, the battle for fourth place between Frenchman Jean Alesi in only his second full season of Grand Prix racing, having driven for Tyrrell last year. You can see Gerhard Berger in the background in sixth place, and all the time, Riccardo Patrese, the most experienced Grand Prix driver of them all, this is his 209th Grand Prix, is looking for an opportunity to get past the V12 Ferrari with Jean Alesi. That's a semi-automatic gearbox like the Williams. They're very evenly matched. Look.
Yes, and Patrese definitely looking for a way past here. In the background, we catch glimpses, little flick of the tail there as Patrese puts the power on. And there's Berger in the background. Now, Berger has been landed. Patrese's having a look down the inside, but no, Alesi is a man who's prepared pretty well to wait forever until he puts his brakes on under that sort of pressure. And there's a replay, as we see. Yes, well, that was that little flick from Patrese, but he had plenty of room between himself and the wall, just the car bouncing as he puts the power on over the bumps. Now, Berger, as I was saying, has been landed by McLaren's in a similar boat to the one in which he started last season, and certainly took the first 4 races in a cockpit that was too small for him. Well, the cockpit overall may not be, but he apparently his feet are extremely cramped in the new car, and really this is wrong, because when you pay a man enormous sums of money, millions of pounds, to do a job, and then give him something in which he cannot do the job, because these cars are difficult enough to drive when everything fits properly, particularly from a physical point of view. When it fits like a glove, it's the only way you can bear it. And there is Berger, and with your feet cramped, you cannot drive with any confidence. You've got to feel for each pedal. You lose time as a result, and it's impossible to say how much of a handicap it is to Berger, but one thing is certain, it is a handicap, and you certainly don't need that in this business.
Yes, he was saying to me yesterday that the car is much, much better in terms of fitment than last year's, but it's still not completely right. But look at the action here, because it's still Senna leading, it's still Prost in second place, it's still Mansell in third. Now, Alesi, we're riding with the Ferrari now, and Alesi's coming up to lap people with Gerhard Berger taking the opportunity to close up on him. And Gerhard Berger is in fourth position. Now, over the line. Here the engine revs. Alesi comes out and passes Aguri Suzuki and laps him, and that is on lap 12. And already he's lapped him, and into the pits comes Gianni Morbidelli, the young Italian driver. He's starting his first full season of Grand Prix racing, and that is in the Minardi with the Ferrari engine. We are on lap 16 now, and that is Tarquini, Gabriele Tarquini, being chased by Martin Brundle, who of course has been into the pits. Here is Prost, and Patrese is catching Nigel Mansell now. Prost in second place, Mansell in third position. The second Williams driver, Riccardo Patrese, is catching his number 1 driver, Nigel Mansell.
Yes, and Mansell won't be too pleased about that. Patrese showing his nose there, going alongside, and he certainly looks as if he wants to get past Mansell. Now, we'll see if Mansell is in any sort of trouble. It may be that Patrese's got his car set up a little bit better. Remember, it's an all-new car, and both drivers would have been, and to say nothing of the engineers, feeling their way a little bit here in setup. Certainly now. Mansell's got the back marker to use as cover, and went a little bit wide there, a little bit wide on the entrance. And Alesi now with Berger in attendance.
What a wonderful scrap it is behind Ayrton Senna, but once again the Brazilian is showing his incredible class. Berger has caught Jean Alesi. There's a gap between Alesi, number 28, who is in 5th position, and the battle for 2nd, 3rd and 4th ahead of him. Now, here it is. Now, there is Martin Brundle. Behind him is Alain Prost, who is in 2nd place. Red 5, Nigel Mansell is being passed by Patrese now. Patrese going on the inside, and he's overshot. Patrese has got too much momentum. He couldn't get round the corner. Nigel Mansell has gone through. He didn't hit Patrese. Patrese spins round, but he must have lost at least extra 2 places. I think Patrese will be down to 6th position.
Well, I wonder if that's Nigel's idea of enjoying his motor racing. I suspect he won't be terribly pleased with Patrese for that, because Patrese, in trying to get past him, quite clearly overcooked it. Mansell was trying to get into the corner and very nearly collected his teammate. Now, here we see an action replay. Now, Patrese leaves his braking possibly late. He locks up. Mansell's trying to get into the corner. Luckily, he sees Patrese just in time, and Mansell must have really scrabbled to have made it round himself, because he was having a bit of an interference getting into the corner.
So, lap 21, quarter distance, Senna leads, and he is now 14 seconds ahead of Alain Prost. Nigel Mansell in 3rd position, Alesi 4th, going through and lapping Martin Brundle. And there is Alesi, followed by Gerhard Berger in 5th position, and behind Gerhard Berger, Riccardo Patrese, after going off course. Now, Patrese may have scrubbed his tyres a bit. He didn't have to lock up too much, and I don't think he will have damaged them. And off comes a tear-off from Ayrton Senna's helmet. And we told you many times, but it's worth repeating. Now, here is a replay of going through Riccardo Patrese, taking Gerhard Berger, and so Patrese certainly has not lost any momentum. He's back to fighting speed, and Patrese, the Italian, moves up ahead of Gerhard Berger into 5th position. There's the confirmation, and you see that Alain Prost on lap 31 has now got a lead of over 18 seconds, with over 1/3 of the race gone. McLaren versus Williams versus Ferrari. The Benettons are not far behind, because in 7th position it is Nelson Piquet. Right behind him in 8th place is Roberto Moreno. 9th is Stefano Modena, and in 10th position behind Stefano Modena is Ivan Capelli in the Leighton house with the new V10 Ilmor engine. But already in this race, Riccardo Patrese is the man to watch. He's at it again. He's catching Alesi. Gerhard Berger is in the background, and it is still Ayrton Senna remorselessly, smoothly driving round, keeping ahead, not only keeping ahead, but pulling away from Alain Prost Ferrari, with Nigel Mansell at the moment not making any impression on Prost Ferrari in 3rd position. Now, where is Gerhard Berger? There he is. Alesi in front of him, and Riccardo Patrese in front of him. So V12 Ferrari follows V12 Honda, and just as it's the McLaren, in the background is Bertrand Gachot. Now, that is Satoru Nakajima, the Japanese driver, who is in 11th place, and he's going off. You see him lock up his tyres, overcooked it at that 90-degree right-hander, shot off, and that's let Bertrand Gachot, the Belgian, through in the new Jordan car with the Ford engine. There is Martini, and we're on lap 32 now in this 82-lap race, so there's still a long, long way to go. At the present moment, out of the race has gone Eric Bernard, and here is Nakajima, back in the running, but going off here. You can see the sparks shooting up from underneath the front wing as the nose dips. So, lap 35. Senna leads by 20 seconds. Prost is only 2 seconds ahead of Mansell. Then it's Alesi in 4th position, followed by Riccardo Patrese, who is catching him. 6th position, and there's a spinner. That's Hakkinen. And something has obviously happened, because that's Mark Blundell, the English driver in the V12 Yamaha-powered Brabham. Now, whether those two stopping had anything to do with each other stopping, I do not know. Here's a replay. Now, there is Hakkinen going into the left-hander, and Blundell has already spun, and Hakkinen, suddenly seeing the Brabham in front of him, spins the car, and that's Mansell! That's Mansell! Nigel Mansell from 3rd position in the race. This reminds me of Detroit, when Nigel Mansell was driving for Lotus and he pushed his car across the line. Now, for some reason I do not understand, Nigel Mansell is frantically pushing his car backwards. That's the pit lane exit that he's coming up towards. I think he's just trying to get his car out of the way. He's getting a fat lot of help from the marshals, I must say. And so now Alain Prost And here's a replay. Now there on the left was Mansell waving his hand, letting Alesi through, and tucked up behind Alesi is Patrese and charging. It is all suddenly happening here at Phoenix. Nigel Mansell out of the race and literally pulling his Williams into the pit lane, hopefully to save it from being damaged as he disconsolately walks in. Well, Nigel said to me before the race began, I very much want to get points here. With every point counting in the World Championship, I must finish here.
Yes, as we watch Senna going pretty comfortably and quietly on his way now. And thank goodness for Riccardo Patrese in what has become really a fairly processional race, although the field isn't that spread out. There hasn't been a lot happening, but Patrese certainly kept us entertained, and he's really charging.
Yeah, as Nigel Mansell walks in, out of the race have gone Eric Bernard, JJ Leto in the Delara Judd, Mark Blundell, Nigel Mansell, 4 retirements. And now, on lap 36, Ayrton Senna there is leading Alain Prost by nearly 20 seconds, with Gerhard Berger up into 3rd place, being chased by Riccardo Patrese. Then in 5th position, that's Berger! As I said it, Gerhard Berger stops. Now, this is what happened, except that he hasn't slid into anything. Last year, his first drive for McLaren, and he's being pushed backwards, so even if he could get going, and he clearly can't, Berger would be out of the race in any case. So, retirement for the first of the 2 McLaren Hondas. Has something gone wrong with his engine? And if so, might it happen to Ayrton Senna's car? We're riding with Senna now, coming up towards half distance, and Senna now leading by over 20 seconds. Now, half distance now in the Phoenix Grand Prix, 82 laps the full distance. And Senna now has got enough of a lead to drive a tactical race. But Alesi, there's Prost in 2nd position. Alesi's in 3rd place, and you can see how Riccardo Patrese is now up with the 2nd Ferrari. And that's Mika Hakkinen sandwiched between the 2 Ferraris. He's got going again. And the incredible Riccardo Patrese, who seems to get younger and younger and faster year by year, is doing it again.
Yes, Hakkinen may well be disqualified from the standings for a push start, but he's had a troublesome race, but he needs the miles. It's his first Grand Prix, the last year's Formula 3 champion. That's Larini in the pits, and the Italian Modena team having a little bit of bother getting the rear wheel off. Keep hammering, boys. I think that's a bit of an inexperience for their first race, but Hakkinen, going back to Hakkinen, last year's Formula 3 champion, very, very talented Finnish driver, and certainly needs every bit of experience that he can get in the team. The team are very pleased with his speed and his talent, though.
Yes, it didn't help there in the Lamborghini team that one Italian mechanic was hammering frantically on the left side of the wheel, while the other mechanic was hammering frantically against him on the other side of the wheel. But Larini gets away now. Larini's driven for quite a few teams now, last year driving for Ligier. And Patrese is challenging Alesi again. The Frenchman in the Ferrari, or rather he's of Sicilian origin, Jean Alesi, has, and there's another retirement, and it's a Ligier. It's Boutsen, Thierry Boutsen, who drove for Williams last year and the year before, and who won for Williams last year and the year before. Went very unhappily to the Ligier team when he was dropped by Williams, hopefully to do well next year when they have Renault engines, but he's got a very old heavy lump of a car this year, and he's out.
And here we have Patrese now. He's been one of the Leighton houses in that Scapelli in the pits, and of course the Leighton House team were attacked by a saboteur during the night on Friday night, with the cars very, all 3 cars very deliberately sabotaged, with brake lines and electrical wires cut, and that's the most extraordinary thing. It's the first time I can remember hearing of any sabotage in Grand Prix racing garages. Now the Ferrari pit ready with tyres, We had expected most of the Goodyear teams to try and go through without a tyre stop, and that was Alesi going into the pits, and he had in fact been passed by Patrese. We didn't see that. That may have prompted him to come in, but certainly he's been slithering and sliding for a few laps now. I think he cooked his tyres fairly early on in the race.
8 seconds, brilliant by normal standards, not all that brilliant by Grand Prix standards. And Alesi rejoins in 7th place. Now the order on lap 44 is Ayrton Senna leading Alain Prost now by an incredible 27 seconds. And now you see a replay of Riccardo Patrese going through, and this was probably, as James said, what prompted Alesi in the Ferrari finally to go into the pits for new tyres. So Alesi is now down, and the Ferrari pits are being readied, I think, for Alain Prost to come in. In 2nd place, 3rd is Riccardo Patrese, and Patrese into the pits comes the Ferrari, and Patrese moves up into 2nd position. So Senna leads, Patrese 2nd in the Williams. Into the pits for a new set of Goodyears comes Alain Prost. Let's see what his time is compared with Alesi. This is a bad stop. He's in trouble. The right rear is stuck.
Yes, once again, Prost has been delayed. It's not the first time it's happened to him at Ferrari, but he got away, but a 15-second pit stop, a lot slower than Alesi's, and he won't be pleased about that because Alesi has got out ahead of him, or rather Prost has got out behind Alesi. He's lost his place, and he'll be keen to stay in front of the back markers, and that's Alboreto in the Arrows with the Porsche engine, which as yet hasn't shown a great turn of speed.
Yes, we have to call it a footwork, of course, these days, now that it's been bought by the Japanese concern. And on lap 47, after Alain Prost's stop, as you see the Ferrari coming up to the Tyrrell in front, it's Senna leading by 32 seconds, leading Riccardo Patrese now in 2nd position, with Nelson Piquet up into 3rd position, Roberto Marini 4th, and into the pits. There is Senna.
Yes, so that's Senna exiting the pits, and he came in for tyres, and one would have to think that Goodyear have looked at the wear on Alesi's tyres and have decided, because we're well over half distance, and tactically this is not the time really to make a stop. And look at that, that is Patrese jumping out of his car, and it looks as if he smacked it into the tyre wall.
Yeah, Patrese, who was 2nd. I don't know what happened. He's clearly just spun because there's no traffic in front of him, no traffic behind him. You can see that he's torn his overalls, and there's another car. I can't see too clearly who it is, but as coming now, here is a replay. And there's somebody missing him. Now he's a sitting duck. He's sitting there. He's strapped into the car. Oh! That is Moreno, Roberto Moreno, the Brazilian in the Benetton, and that's Alesi going through and clipping some of the debris. As on this replay, Riccardo Patrese very wisely jumps out of his car and sprints away to safety. And we're riding now with the Ferrari of Jean Alesi, and you can see on this replay how he just manages to avoid the debris. And the race order now is Ayrton Senna leading. Up into 2nd place has gone Alain Prost. And then behind him, it is Stefano Modena going well. And there is Nelson Piquet. So we are now into lap 51 in this 82-lap race. I said earlier on that there was going to be decimation in terms of cars going out with one problem or the other, mechanical failure or driving into the wall, and so it has turned out to be. As Ayrton Senna waves to somebody he has just lapped, and Alain Prost is fighting back now. He is in 5th position. That's Mika Hakkinen. Mika Hakkinen, the Finn, exiting from his Lotus, and you can see for yourself that there's some sort of fire at the back. He's only 22 years old, Hakkinen. He got his chance. He's looked after, managed by Keke Rosberg in the same way that JJ Leto is, and both the Finns are certainly benefiting from their countrymen's expertise and experience. Now, down the long straight and into the right-hander, one of several on the course, goes Ayrton Senna. Well, Senna has got enough experience, heaven knows, because this, as the double world champion, is his 111th Grand Prix, of which he has won 26. If he stays where he is and wins this one, he will match Jackie Stewart's record of 27 Grand Prix victories, which for a long time, until Alain Prost passed him, made him the most winning Grand Prix driver. And now the Ferraris are really getting at it, because you can see coming towards us now, Alesi has been passed by Nelson Piquet and Alain Prost, and Alain Prost is going to try and dive through between the Ferrari of Alesi and the Benetton of Piquet, and he does it. A masterly bit of driving by Alain Prost, who's certainly lost none of his expertise over the winter and moves up 2 places in 1 corner.
Yes, I think Alesi slowed Piquet up out of the previous corner, but credit to Alesi there, because he saw what Prost was trying to do and did the proper teammate's duty and made room for Prost to get out. And that was good thinking by Alesi, because Prost was clearly very anxious. He had a chance, and overtaking is so difficult here that if Alesi hadn't accommodated him there, things would not have been too happy between the two of them.
Yeah, and I better correct myself before the letters come in, because Mika Hakkinen, of course, is not managed by Keke Rosberg, but on lap 70 in this 82-lap race, or we think it's going to be 82 laps, or it'll be 2 hours, whichever is the sooner, and it's going to be a very close-run thing. Ayrton Senna, that we're looking at, is leading Alain Prost, who's moved back into 2nd position by 40 seconds, with Nelson Piquet in 3rd position. Here is the battle for 4th between Alesi, whose Ferrari is smoking, and Stefano Modena in the Tyrrell Honda, who's pushing him very hard indeed and going for the place. Is he going to get it? Yes. Alesi is forced out onto the wider line, and there is something very wrong indeed with Alesi's Ferrari. You can see the smoke pouring out of the back. We've seen that in the past, and they've gone on, notably with Mansell, but Alesi does not look at all happy to me.
Yes, and it looks to me like that's coming from the gearbox. It's very local, rather than from the engine and coming all the way around the gearbox and out of the back. And Modena takes advantage of whatever distress Alesi, what problem Alesi's got. And a good steady drive by Modena. He's been there and thereabouts all the way through. He hasn't been able to overtake many people, but he's picked up places, and the new Tyrrell certainly shows promise.
And that's Alesi. Alesi going off the course, dodging behind the tyre walls into safety. I don't know why he's going on all that way, but anyway, John Alesi is clearly out of the race to join Modena, Nakajima, Patrese, Alboreto, Boutsen-Berger, Mansell, Blundell, Leto and Eric Bernard. Nakajima in 5th position, my apologies, as Jean Alesi walks back to the pits. And now on lap 74, it is Ayrton Senna leading Alain Prost by nearly 40 seconds. Nelson Piquet is starting to close, and that's Martini, who is in 6th position, but it doesn't look to me as though he's going to be there very much longer, because the Ferrari V12 engine behind him, the first time that Minardi have had the Ferrari engine, is smoking as badly as Alesi's was. And that is Nakajima, the Japanese driver. So we've got Nakajima in the points, and Aguri Suzuki, his countryman, is pretty close to the points too, because he at the moment is in 8th position, and there's a possibility of having 2 Japanese drivers finishing in the top 6, as they did in the Japanese Grand Prix last year. And here is Martini retiring. Well, we've had the news from the pits that Nigel Mansell's problem was gearbox. Gerhard Berger had a fuel pressure problem, and so that accounts for the retirements of 2 of the top men. And as you can see, Ayrton Senna leads Prost, then Piquet, then Modena, 4 different cars in the first 4, and that's Gasho retiring. What rotten luck.
Yes, that'll be a great disappointment to Eddie Jordan's new team, because Gasho looked set fair for a finish and very close to the points. And for this new team, they need all the uplift that they can get. It's beautifully turned out. The car is certainly good, but they were unfortunate in that they didn't get De Cesaris in through pre-qualifying. But Gasho has certainly showed well through qualifying, through the warm-up, and in the race so far.
So, coming up to the last lap, and another copybook drive by Ayrton Senna, who dominated practice as he so very often does. 2 hours is the time that the race is allowed to last, and we are not going to do 82 laps, we're going to do it at 81, and Senna is going to win here in Phoenix unless he has trouble on this lap, which I very much doubt.
Yes, so the copybook drive by Ayrton Senna, as you rightly say, Murray, and really laying down the gauntlet for the others. The current world champion says, you will have to get out and beat me, because he really dominated today's race.
Yes, but look at this on the last lap. Nelson Piquet in the Benetton is charging. He won in Japan, he won in Australia last year. He's trying to take that second place from Alain Prost. I don't think he'll do it, but it's going to be very close indeed. And Senna has slowed right down. You can see visually that he's going much, much slower. Indeed, if I didn't know Senna and the car and the reliability that his Honda engine will have, I would suspect him of being in trouble. But he's clearly not. The race has run the 2 hours. So Ayrton Senna has won the first Grand Prix of 1991 to take 10 points. Because this year, victory earns 10 points for the driver and the constructor, as opposed to 9 last year. And a pretty popular move it is too. But the question is that Senna waves to the crowd, not only waves to the crowd, but he knows the camera is behind him and that he's waving to us as he enters the start and finish straight for the last time, takes the checkered flag to win here in Phoenix. And so, Ayrton Senna wins at Phoenix from Alain Prost in the Ferrari. Nelson Piquet makes it 3 cars in 3 places, and Stefano Modena makes it 4. Nakajima brings the second Tyrrell home, as they did last year. Both Tyrrells have finished in the top 6, and Aguri Suzuki finishes 6th as the second Japanese driver. And a brilliant drive, as ever, for Ayrton Senna, who's made the challenge to everybody else for 1991. I am the man.
The car ran very well. I had small problems only with the gearbox. And also the car balance was not optimal. It's the first time I ran a Grand Prix distance with this car, and the balance, the setup was not quite right. So it was very difficult to drive. But I was able to maintain a good pace and go through the lap, the back markers. And
the problem, I think we were not fast enough to compete with the McLaren today. In fact, I had also problems, especially with the clutch, and also had a long pit stop. But in any case, I could not win the race. So I'm quite happy with this position. 6 points today. Considering the track is not very good for the Ferrari, also not very good for me. I think it's not too bad. Last year, at the same point, I did not finish the race, so I had 9 points disadvantage. Today, it's not too bad.
So already 1991 looks like being a Senna versus Prost confrontation. But with McLaren seemingly in control, can Ferrari fight back in Brazil? You can see for yourself in 2 weeks' time on Grand Prix.